On the floor, just throw money.
You're really pissing me off, Sheila.
I'm pissing you off. I'm doing what I said I'd do. What the hell are you doing?
You've been had. You've been had. Let your angels show you to the light.
I've been trying, but they don't know if I can do it.
I told her I hated her.
She would forgive you.
No. You don't know.
My name's Matthew Harrison, and I'm a filmmaker. I started in, I think I made my first films in 1968, 69, in the New York City public school system. That's how I got my start. I was in a terrific school called PS41, which is still there. And I had a great teacher there named Jerry Goldstein, who, as part of his curriculum, it was an experimental class, which they were doing in the 60s. And he had us making films. He had a couple of Brownie, no, they were Revere, I think, little wind-ups. And we would shoot regular 8 black and white. The kind where it's one spool and you shoot 25 feet and then you open it up and flip it over and shoot it 25 feet down the other side of the 16. And when you send it to the lab, they develop it and then they slit it down the middle and turn one around and stick it on. So right in the middle of your movie, your film would start to go white, and then there would be a splice, and then the image would start to reappear.
Yeah, this is a very interesting book. In fact, it's given me an idea. I am gonna create a monster of my own. Yes?
I remember I was tapped in the class to be the director of the class project, which was the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. So I was pretty excited. I mean, that's a big deal for a 5th grader to be given that responsibility, because one of the things we did was we had our principal, Irving Kreitzberg, dress up as Nero. He had a sheet wrapped around him. He played the fiddle, and then we wound the film back and shot some fire so you could see. Irving Kreitzberg was a really gentle person, so, you know, but years later I realized that's pretty funny that we got our principal to do that.
What happened to my money? What? I've been pickpocketed, quick! Hey, Mr. Detective, you gotta help me. Some guy stole my money. I'll get him, don't worry. Hey, there he is! Take that, you private detective, you! Hey, mister, you got my money!
The first one I did was called The Rip-Off, and it was a story about, I made it with my brother, Ben Harrison, and 2 friends of ours, Rick and Andy Parker, and our idea was that Rick gets mugged, because getting mugged was a big topic of conversation in the late 60s in Manhattan. And so of course that captured our imagination. We got an idea that our main character gets mugged, and he goes and hires a private detective to find the mugger and get the money back, which he does. And the private detective accosts the mugger, but the mugger beats him up. But then the mugger urinates in public and is arrested by the police. So he gets his comeuppance in the end. That was our idea. It was an ironic ending.
I'm just adjusting the tape recorder inside him. Now I gotta shoot him with some liquid of some kind. Perhaps I can slip him a pill, and he'll eat it, and that will end this nightmare that I've created.
We also made some splatter films and some ultra-violent films. Somehow we managed to sneak in to see Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, Peckinpah, and so we were determined to make a film with a lot of guns and a lot of blood. So I directed a picture called The Kitty Massacre, where basically these 2 gangsters just blow away this gang of little kids. And that was a big deal because we purchased our own props, our own special effects gear. We went and bought a bottle of ketchup. You know, and when you're like 11, that's kind of a big deal to think that far in advance. They're beautifully made, man. They just used to make them so nicely. So the first films I was making were on regular 8mm cameras, and the one that I used to use was very similar to this. It's a Revere 8, and they were nice cameras. They were wind up. They didn't require a battery. It was a real pleasure to use them. And the way it worked was it was one spool of 16mm film, and you'd thread it in here, and it was a 25-foot spool. And so you'd run it through to the end, and then you'd open this up, and you'd reverse the reels, flip it over, and you'd shoot down the other side of the film, and that would expose the entire roll, and then you'd send that to the lab, and the lab would take the roll, develop it, and then they'd slit the film down the middle, flip around the other end, splice it on. I was shooting films all the way through the 70s at junior high school. The idea of going to film school had not occurred to me. It wasn't as available in those days as it is now. What I did was I went to art school. I went to Cooper Union School of Art. And at Cooper Union, I started shooting 16mm films. I was still shooting Super 8. But Cooper Union, the filmmaking at art school was very different. It was experimental filmmaking. And I had a terrific teacher named Robert Breer. And our focus was much more on the image and how images work. And it wasn't really about storytelling in the traditional sense. At art school, it was much more about how storytelling happens in a more, I guess, subconscious way through images and sound. And that was actually a great education for me, working that way. So it meant that really for 4 years I didn't do any narrative filmmaking. When you go to 16, the gauge is twice the width of 8mm. It's a very narrow width film, Super 8. 16 is a big jump, and it's considered more professional. Like when I directed Sex and the City, we shot it on 16mm. I moved out to LA for a year, and I was working as a advertising designer, but I found it didn't really inspire me living here at that time. And the early 80s art scene was beginning in New York City, and so a lot of my friends in the East Village were doing really interesting things, and I went back to New York. And when I got back to New York, I changed the technology game. I re-upped the technology, and I went and I purchased a Sync Sound Super 8 camera. Because in the early 80s, they were building these beautiful cameras where you could shoot Sync Sound on color Super 8. And I got back to my narrative filmmaking. In 1985, I founded Film Crash, which is my company in a screening series, and I currently run it with my two partners, Carl Nussbaum and Scott Saunders. I started on a project called Apartment 8, which I did with Michael Kanicki from the Rave Ups, a good actor, great songwriter, great singer, and a theater director named Bob McGrath, who's also trained as an actor. And the two of us set out to make a film that really showed what it was like as the new wave of like downwardly mobile white guys who were like moving in to the Lower East Side, which at the time was mostly Hispanic and still really is. We wanted to show what it was like during that period of history in New York, to live there. Apartment 8 was the first picture I made that it occurred to me that I could submit it to film festivals, because they really weren't part of my world. They really weren't part of the kind of filmmaking world downtown in the East Village and the Lower East Side. It was kind of a complete world for us, everything from the making of the films to the screening of the film. Tessa Freeland and Ella Troiano were running a really great festival in downtown New York in those days called New York Film Festival Downtown. They don't run it anymore, but for a number of years it really was the festival of record for downtown, like underground, experimental, alternative, independent American film, New York filmmaking. Everybody who was anybody in the downtown scene's film was in that festival. So when you look at their programs, it's like a who's who of all the people. And they said, we'd love to program your film. And And it ended up winning the best prize for best film at the festival, which was shocking to me. I mean, I was pretty young. I think I was 27. In those days, there was no internet, so it was a bit of a trick to find out about festivals. There was one place called what was it called? AIVF. It was on Broadway, the Association of Independent Video and Filmmakers. And in their little office, they had a little library. And in their little library, they had a compilation of film festivals that they used to keep. And I would go over there, and they had a coffee table, and I'd get that book off the shelf and sit down with a notepad, and I would just write down all the festivals that sounded interesting. I think fax machines hadn't even started yet, and VHS hadn't happened yet. So to submit, you actually had to send a print. So I had one print. I had the original, and then Kodak had struck one print of the film for me, so I could mail that away. So it really meant you could only apply to one festival at a time. After I won that prize at downtown, I was encouraged, and I got in touch with the Ann Arbor Film Festival, who used to show Super 8 films, and sent the film off there, and lo and behold, it won a prize there. So that Apartment 8's a key film for me. I set out to make my first feature film, which I co-wrote with my good friend Christopher Grimm. We chose a story that was kind of a hybrid story. It was a combination of a comedy, and it was a very tongue-in-cheek film noir called Spare Me. It was a bowling thriller.
Some people will do anything for an autograph.
Millie left to stay with her sister around Kokomo.
You know what a mixer ball is?
For the choice of a first feature, it was perhaps not the best choice because it was complicated and it was a hybrid. So you had to kind of get a lot of things at the same time in order to enjoy the film. We shot it in color, Super 16. Then I spent about another $40,000 post-producing it. So it ended up being about an $80,000 feature. And I finished that film. Original music by Danny Brenner and Hugh O'Donovan. Beautiful soundtrack.
God is bowling.
I just couldn't get arrested with that film. Could not get arrested. I remember submitting it to all these American festivals, and the crazy thing that happened with Spare Me is it started getting accepted to festivals in Florida, and I didn't know why this was. Like a rash of festivals. Like all these festivals in Florida started screening Spare Me, and I was like, wow, like we've been discovered in Europe and in Florida. And I could only attribute it to like going there and screening the film. I realized Floridians had this like really different sense of humor. But the cool thing that happened in Avignon, France was Spare Me ended up winning the top prize of the festival. Well, there are two top prizes, one for a French film and one for an American film. And we ended up getting the top prize, which was a $20,000 cash prize. With Kodak's help, we ended up using that money to make my next feature film, a picture called Rhythm Thief.
Don't take your eyes off me for a second. You do and I'll kill you. Watch me.
Rhythm Thief was kind of like going back to what I did with Apartment 8. It was like basically one guy in a Lower East Side apartment, and I knew I had an apartment in an apartment building because I knew the landlord, and we wrote this script. I collaborated on it with a buddy of mine, and it had started turning into a comedy, and I remember taking the script and I remember just completely tearing it apart and just taking it back to this very, very simple, very basic story, which all took place within 5 blocks of this apartment I had.
On every inch of every street, every block in the city, at least one person's died.
Some heavy shit, G.
One day I'm gonna find myself lying in the street with my blood pumping out of my body, and I'll look up and I'll see people walk by. I'm just something they saw on the way to work.
We were transferring John Horn's music off audio cassette tapes. Remember those?
Yeah.
Transferring those to 16 millimeter mag stock, lining them up with the film. I think I raised about another 25 or 30 grand to pay for the mix and the print. And I remember we started it out small, like Long Island Film Festival, and then a couple other smaller ones, just to kind of get the feel of how it was playing. And then it got accepted to Toronto. And I remember I was standing in the lobby of the theater, and this guy came running out of the theater saying, "Where's your film played?" And I could have said, well, Long Island Film Festival and a couple others that we played at, but I didn't. I said, nowhere. And he said, "I'm from the Sundance Film Festival." It was Christian Gaines. And he ran over to the payphones, because in those days to make a call you had to go to a payphone. I guess he was calling the guys here in LA. They accepted the film, which was, that was exciting. And then when we went to Sundance with Rhythm Thief, I remember one of the very good PR firms in New York had called me on the phone. "We really want to do the PR for your film Rhythm Thief at Sundance." And I remember going uptown to meet with them, and then they said, "We love your film, we're committed to it, and we want to do the PR on your movie, and it's going to cost you $12,000. And I remember, like, well, I guess you guys really love it. But Rhythm Thief ended up getting a jury prize at the Sundance Film Festival. An agent I met out of Toronto, a guy named Paul Schwartzman, really interesting cat. He was an independent agent. Paul had called me on the phone and said, "Hey, I think Martin Scorsese would really like your Rhythm Thief. Can I give him a VHS tape?" And I said, "Sure." I remember I was here. I was in California, in Santa Monica at the time, because I'd gotten signed with William Morris Agency, and I had a management company working with me, and I had a lawyer. All this like big reality check stuff was happening. And that was when I started shooting my little Hollywood. Because I had met Sean Andrews, and we started shooting my little Hollywood. So it was funny, what came out of making Rhythm Thief was a desire to start shooting. I had a high-8 camera, and what was going on around me for the first time in my life was a lot of people were talking to me about making films. A lot of people were saying, "You can do anything you want," and talking about making movies, companies wanting to make movies and giving me money. But it was a strange time, because nobody was actually committing and giving me money to make these movies. So I just didn't understand how the whole Hollywood thing worked, or how the whole... So I just started shooting.
He said, "Why'd you stop?" And I said, "You know what? I respect you too much to do this."
Ooh. And then what happened?
She called me a fucking liar and left.
The phone rang, and it was Marty Scorsese's, and he said, "You made a terrific film, and what do you want to do next?" And I had that script I'd been writing at American Express, kicked in the head. And I said, "Well, I got this script. It's a New York story." He said, "Well, why don't you come to New York and let's talk about it."
Truth? What truth? I'm burning up, Uncle Sam. Is that why your clothes are on fire?
No.
My apartment caught fire. You going through a self-destructive period?
No.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, sort of. See, now you got me worried about you. You know, you remind me of myself, and that ain't so good.
It runs in the family, I guess.
Yeah, hey, so you spoke to your mom?
July of '96, we were shooting my first studio picture, Kicked in the Head, with movie stars, and it was my first union experience. So it couldn't have been more different. So I went from a $35,000 movie with a very small crew, very personal, to a $3.8 million union picture. I was in the guild, and I had a union. It was a union shoot. I remember showing up to the set and looking down the block. As far as I could see were these big trailers and all these people I didn't know.
I'm in love with the stewardess. She's not interested in me.
Stewardess? You're fucked, man.
Yeah?
I knew a stewardess one time. Never get involved with stewardesses.
Yeah? Why?
Because their internal clocks are all fucked up.
It's a beautiful day in Santa Monica. The jewel of Southern California, we call it. It's another beautiful day in Southern California. Santa Monica. The living is easy, the rent is cheap, food is great. You know, to be honest, I don't know why the hell I ended up landing here in Southern California. But it's been good to get some distance on New York. You know, you love, what is it? Absence makes the heart grow fonder. It's a pretty sleepy town, Santa Monica. Oh, we got ourselves a sunset. Holy smokes. Look at that. Wow, that's a good one, huh? And looking forward to getting back into the real swing of it. Back into the major leagues. And I feel like I've really got some things to say now and some films to make. Yeah, man. Bring it on. Let's make some movies.
Okay, I'll catch you later. Bada bing. Uncle Sammy says goodbye. Call your mom.